Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Brady and I'm the Youth Voter Coordinator for NYCVotes at the Campaign Finance Board. Did you know that young New Yorkers turn out in high levels for presidential elections, but at very low levels for local elections? NYC Votes has found an engaging way to address this problem by launching the We Power NYC Ambassador program. This is an all out effort to get young people to turn up and turn out in the upcoming elections. It's time for us young people to get our voices heard. My guest today is Mira Dasgupta. Meera is a current We Power NYC Ambassador and the 2020 U.S. Youth Poet Laureate. She uses her voice to mobilize and bring attention to the important issues young New Yorkers are facing today. Hi, Meera.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here today. Let's get right into it. So, you are a young activist in your community. So, I'm just wondering, what type of activism do you see young people in your community advocating for? And do you see this activism translating to the polls?
Yeah, so currently climate change, gender equality, gun violence, and especially right now, the Black Lives Matter movement are all prevalent right now within our society. And I think that especially with COVID-19, using social media as a means for change is very important and prevalent within our current situation. And some of my peers have started nonprofits or personal initiatives. Like I know in LaGuardia, there are some students who created the Cure campaign. And then there's also Coalition Z, and Tim Hunter and Jessica Rosario are also two individuals who have also advocated for certain measures as well. And in terms of your question on whether it has translated to the polls, the answer is no. And according to data, youth voter turnout is actually going down, which is fairly interesting considering the disparity between advocacy and voter turnout. But that's something that our youth ambassadors are doing right now. And I think that what our actions in terms of peer to peer voter turnout is important because as youth ambassadors, it's also prevalent in order to do such a thing.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's so great to hear about all of the amazing advocacy that's happening with young people. We know that young people are super involved. So I'm just curious, why do you think there's this disparity between advocacy and turning out to the polls?
I think, first of all, there is a lack of civic education within our school system. And in terms of structural knowledge, not many people have access to that as well. For example, in my AP government and politics class, we are talking about this as well and discussing how people need knowledge in order to make informed decisions when going to the polls. And then there's also institutional barriers which prevent people from being able to vote. For example, in terms of online voter registration right now, not many people have the access to driver's licenses or even have the need for one. And through this, right now, people can only vote online if they have a state ID, which also not many people have. And of course, there are socioeconomic barriers for many young New Yorkers. So it prevents many 18-year-olds from being able to vote. And for a final point, there's also cultural barriers as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, Mira, what are some of the conversations that you and your peers are having about voting? I know you kind of mentioned a conversation in your AP government class. What are young people talking about when it comes to voting?
I feel as if people aren't really talking about voting within our age group. And I like circling back to what I said before, I feel like as if it's a lack of knowledge and institutional barriers which prevent people from discussing such things. Because even though there are many people who are advocating for such topics, it doesn't necessarily translate to the polls or the information that's being spread upon it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's very true. And I've also found that's true when I do my youth engagement workshops around the city. But, I'm just wondering, how do we, first of all, address these barriers? How do we provide the tools and institutional knowledge of government to uplift the work that young organizers are doing around the city?
Yeah, I think that we need to make voting more accessible to all communities. For example, many I've heard that a lot of the voting documents aren't necessarily translated well, so we also need to make them culturally relevant for education. And also, it's important to have honest conversations about voting and have peer to peer engagement and reforms. For example, circling back to online voting as well, we have to make that available for other youths, especially with the ambassador program that we're doing right now. Having this peer-to-peer engagement model is allowing for more youth to become involved in order to break the socioeconomic and institutional barriers which prevent people from voting. So I think that's very important, especially right now.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I love that you brought up the We Power NYC Ambassador program. But I guess like something that's happening right now is a lot of the Black Lives Matter marches. Do you think that young people feel that their voices are being heard through these protests?
I think that, yeah, people are using protests and are using what is happening right now and social media in order to reach out and have their voices be heard. And I think that youth voice especially is important during this crisis within a crisis that we find ourselves in, because the youth are the future and our voices can shape the nation as well. But I feel like in terms of voting, that's what people need to know more about. During COVID, not many people have the opportunities to do so. So I feel like though youth voice has been prevalent during these protests, people need to know that voting is another option to get their voices out and heard.
Absolutely, that's so true, right? Like we know that voting alone is not the only solution to solve these great structural changes that we need right now, but it is this really important first step. So, as a We Power NYC ambassador, how do you think that you're getting other young people engaged with voting and involved in the political process, especially when we're thinking about people who are not old enough to vote yet, like yourself?
Well, considering people who aren't allowed to vote yet, there's so many other options in order to get your voice heard. Because I know that people are starting campaigns and lobbying as youths who aren't able to vote, but are able to shift the vote as well. And I think it's important to build these habits at such a young age, because bringing more people into the voting sphere this early is also something which allows the future generations of voters to be conglomerated and heard as well. And as We Power ambassadors, through this peer to peer model that I've discussed many times before in these questions, it allows for more people at a young age to become knowledgeable about voting. And we've also have have we've had phone banking opportunities, and we've talked about issues within the voting sphere. And having these conversations is a first step in order to make sure that voting is something more prevalent within our society.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that answer, Mira, and thank you for speaking with me. I do want to ask, since you are the 2020 U.S. Youth Poet Laureate, would you mind giving us some voting inspiration in the form of a poem?
Yeah, sure. I can start right now. I saved a nation in the time it took for the burning to begin. As the hallelujahs reached the sky, as their hands held each other tight, before I realized that my mama held mine, her eyes roaming the skyline, pen in hand. To save the city, you'd think you need a sword, but with this running ink, the page stains black. I watch a city of ash turn in its grave and take a soft breath. I thought I could hear a melody drifting in from elsewhere, 100 strong, calling me, singing, alive.
Amazing, Mira. That was such a beautiful poem. Thank you so much for offering your time and talents today. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm so happy to have you on board as a We Power NYC ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. For election news and updates, be sure to follow at NYCVotes on Instagram. And you can also take the pledge to vote, which is a great way to stay engaged. So just text VOTE 2020 to 917-979-6377. I'll say that one more time. Text VOTE 2020 to 917-979-6377. Thank you for watching and stay safe, New York.